No ship had entered the Forbidden Zone in over 400 years. Not by accident, not by war, not by desperation. The region existed on every star map as a dark scar, marked with symbols older than most civilizations. No borders, no ownership, only a warning written in dozens of extinct languages. Do not enter. The Forbidden Zone was not empty because no one wanted it. It was empty because everything that entered it vanished. Entire fleets had gone silent there. Explorers, pirates, religious pilgrims, even ancient empires at the height of their power had tested it once and never again. No debris, no distress calls, not even ghosts in the sensors. Space itself seemed wrong inside the zone. Light bent strangely. Signals died. Navigation failed. It was as if the universe refused to remember what went in. So when the first alarm triggered, no one believed it. At a remote monitoring station on the edge of the galactic map, automated systems flagged an anomaly deep inside the forbidden coordinates. The alert was dismissed as sensor drift. Then it triggered again and again. The station's overseer finally ordered a manual scan. What the sensors returned made no sense. There was an object inside the Forbidden Zone. Large, solid, artificial. The system froze for half a second, an eternity for machines, then escalated the alert to priority red. Emergency channels lit up across multiple empires at once, as if ancient protocols had been waiting for this moment. Within minutes, observatories, military arrays, and deep space listeners across the galaxy all focused on the same impossible point. And they all saw it. A single warship. Humans. It did not arrive in a flash of light. There was no warp ripple, no hyperspace tear, no violent entry. One moment, the Forbidden Zone was empty as it had always been. The next moment, the ship was simply there, perfectly still, as if it had always belonged. The vessel was massive, far larger than modern human ships were supposed to be. Its hull was dark, layered with thick armor scarred by ancient impacts. No visible markings. No active weapons fire. No shields flaring. Just silence. For the first time in centuries, the Forbidden Zone contained something that had not been erased. Panic spread faster than any signal. Emergency councils were summoned. Old leaders were dragged from retirement. Religious orders declared omens. Military commanders argued whether this was a trick, a weapon, or a mistake that would doom them all. One truth cut through every argument. Humans were not supposed to be capable of this. Humanity has always been a background species. Short-lived, loud, persistent, yes, but small. Their territory sat at the edge of mapped space. Their fleets were outdated. Their politics are messy. They were tolerated, sometimes mocked, rarely feared. And now one of their warships was sitting calmly inside the most lethal region of space ever discovered. The ship did not broadcast. It did not move. It did not respond to hail in any known frequency. It simply waited. Deep within the galactic archives, ancient automated systems began to wake up. Data vaults sealed for centuries unlocked themselves. Warning beacons that had never activated in living memory flared to life. Somewhere, far beneath layers of forgotten code, a classification long thought irrelevant was restored. Containment status compromised. Military probes were dispatched, small, unmanned, expendable. They approached the ship cautiously, skimming the edge of the Forbidden Zone. The first probe lost signal instantly. The second vanished without transmitting data. The third never reached the zone at all. Its systems shut down as if space itself refused to let it pass. The human warship remained untouched, unbothered, as if the Forbidden Zone answered it. Then, after hours of silence, the ship moved. Not fast, not aggressively. It adjusted its orientation by a few degrees, turning its bow toward the galactic core. That was when the galaxy truly began to tremble. Because buried in ancient records was a detail no one wanted to remember. The Forbidden Zone was not a natural phenomenon. It was a battlefield, and humanity had been the last species recorded anywhere near it. As the warship's internal systems powered up, long-dormant structures deep inside the zone began to stir. Faint energy readings spiked. Space twisted subtly, like something stretching after a long sleep. Across the galaxy, ancient beacons finished activating. Every single one pointed to the same place, the human ship, and whatever it had come back to face. The galaxy held its breath, because whatever humans had left behind was waking up. The galaxy did not sleep that cycle. Across thousands of systems, emergency chambers filled with voices that had not been raised in centuries. Star maps glowed. Ancient protocols, unused, untested, and half-forgotten, took control of civilian networks without asking permission. The Forbidden Zone was no longer just a legend. It had a visitor, and the visitor was human. At the center of the largest political union in known space, the High Assembly convened in panic. Representatives from dozens of species argued in overlapping languages. Some demanded an immediate military response. Others begged for silence, terrified that even attention might provoke whatever lived inside the zone. But one question drowned out all others. Why humans? Humanity had not been relevant in galactic affairs for generations. Their diplomats rarely spoke. Their fleets never joined joint exercises. Their borders were quiet, almost empty. Many believed humans were slowly fading, content to exist on the edge of history. That belief was now collapsing. Archivists were ordered to dig, not just recent data, but deep records, files written on materials no longer used, stored in vaults that required physical access and genetic clearance. What they found made no one comfortable. Early galactic history mentioned humans often, too often, not as conquerors, not as leaders, as participants in conflicts that ended badly. Every time humans appeared in those records, the same pattern followed. Entire regions were wiped clean. Trade routes collapsed. Species vanished from census logs with no explanation. Then the records stopped mentioning humans altogether. At first, archivists believed this was coincidence. Then they noticed something worse. The files had been edited. Someone had removed details, names, outcomes. In some cases, entire centuries were summarized in a single line. Stability restored. Restored from what? In a restricted archive beneath the assembly chamber, an elderly historian named Tauren stared at a fragment of pre-Union data that should not have survived. It was written in a primitive translation format, barely compatible with modern systems. The fragment was short. We warned them not to erase it, not to forget. Humans do not retreat. They endure. Tauren felt a coldness spread through his body. He had studied extinct civilizations his entire life. This did not read like a myth. It read like regret. While politicians argued, military analysts focused on the ship itself. The human warship had finally begun transmitting, not outward, but inward. Energy levels rose in controlled pulses. Internal systems activated one by one, methodical and calm. No wasted motion. No panic. Scans revealed its structure in more detail. The hull was layered with materials no modern species used anymore. Some layers were crystalline. Others were dense alloys whose formulas no longer existed in any database. The ship bore scars from weapons no longer fielded, wide burns, deep fractures, impact marks from forces that would tear modern ships apart. This ship had fought wars long before current empires were born, and it had survived them. Engineers noted something even more unsettling. The ship was not powered by a single core. It had redundancy layered upon redundancy, as if designed to operate alone for centuries without resupply. Its systems showed signs of extreme age, but also constant maintenance, as if someone had been caring for it quietly, patiently, over generations. Someone had never abandoned it. A young tactical officer asked the question no one wanted to answer. If humans left the galaxy's center, why leave the ship behind? No one replied. Meanwhile, deep inside the Forbidden Zone, space itself began to behave differently. Gravitational readings shifted. Background radiation fluctuated in unnatural patterns. Observatories detected brief distortions, like echoes without a source. Something was moving. The human ship responded immediately. Without firing a weapon or raising visible shields, it repositioned itself precisely along a narrow spatial corridor. Sensors suggested the corridor was artificial, a channel carved into space itself long ago. The realization spread slowly, then all at once. The Forbidden Zone was not random. It was engineered. Every disaster is attributed to it. Every vanished fleet. Every missing civilization. They were not victims of space. They were casualties of containment. Back in human space, alarms sounded for the first time in decades. Dormant stations activated. Long idle shipyards powered up. Data streams flowed into command centers that had not been staffed in years. Human leaders did not argue. They did not hesitate. They had been waiting. On a quiet command deck orbiting a blue star far from the galactic core, a human admiral watched the live feed of the warship inside the Forbidden Zone. His expression did not change, but his hands tightened behind his back. "They found it earlier than expected," he said softly. An officer beside him swallowed. "Do we proceed, sir?" The admiral nodded. "We always were." Back in the assembly, panic reached a breaking point. A fringe coalition voted to authorize a show of force. They would send a fleet, not into the Forbidden Zone, but close enough to demonstrate resolve. The motion passed narrowly. Ships launched within hours. As the fleet assembled near the edge of the zone, the human warship finally did something new. It was transmitted. The message was short, clear, untranslated. Human language. No threats. No demands. Only 6 words. Containment is failing. Do not advance. The fleet commanders froze. Some wanted to obey. Others refused to take orders from a species they had dismissed for centuries. Before a decision could be reached, space twisted violently just beyond the human ship. Something massive pressed against the boundary. Sensors screamed. Data spiked. Entire sections of the Forbidden Zone flickered, as if reality itself was straining to hold together. The human warship powered up every system at once. And for the first time, the galaxy understood the truth it had buried. Humans had not left the center of galactic history because they lost. They left because someone had to stay behind. And whatever they were holding was starting to push back. The first thing the galaxy noticed was silence. Not the normal silence of space, but something heavier. Communications near the Forbidden Zone began to lag. Timestamps no longer matched. Messages arrived seconds late, then minutes. Reality itself felt strained. The multinational fleet halted at the edge of the zone, engines idling, weapons armed but unfired. Commanders stared at their displays, watching the human warship hold position like an anchor driven into the fabric of space. It had not moved since the warning. Containment is failing. Do not advance. Some captains argued the message was a bluff. Others whispered that humans had no right to command anyone. Pride rose. Fear followed close behind. Then something touched the boundary. At first, it appeared as a distortion, like heat over stone. Sensors struggled to focus. The shape refused to resolve into something solid. It was not a ship. It was not energy. It was absent. A region where space simply stopped behaving as expected. The distortion pushed outward, slowly, deliberately, testing the invisible wall that held it back. Every attempt caused spikes across all instruments. Some systems shut down entirely, unable to process what they were seeing. The human warship reacted instantly. Massive structures along its hull unfolded, components that had remained hidden until now. Not weapons, not shields, anchors. They extended into space, locking into points that should not exist. The ship's power output surged, not in a single burst, but in layered waves, as if it were bracing against something unimaginably heavy. Engineers across the observing fleets gasped. The ship was not fighting the distortion. It was holding it in place. Data from long-buried human archives finally decrypted at the assembly. What they revealed chilled even the most hardened leaders. The Forbidden Zone was a prison. Not for one enemy. For many. Over thousands of years, humanity had encountered something that did not conquer worlds or build empires. It erased them. It moved through space like a hunger, consuming stars, memories, and even records of its victims. Most species never noticed it until it was too late. Humans did. They learned. They adapted. They paid the price. Instead of chasing the enemy across the galaxy, humanity made a choice no one else would have made. They built a cage around it. Entire regions were sacrificed. Stars were destabilized. Civilizations were evacuated or lost. The galaxy survived because humans accepted that some horrors could not be destroyed, only contained. The warship inside the Forbidden Zone was not a relic. It was a warden. Back at the fleet, panic finally broke discipline. A commander from a younger species gave the order to fire a probe into the distortion. Not to attack, just to observe. The probe crossed the boundary. It did not explode. It did not vanish. It simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Erased. Every record of it, mass, energy signature, data trail, collapsed into nothing. It was as if the probe had never been built. The distortion expanded slightly. The human ship responded by diverting power to its anchors. The strain showed. Hull plates groaned. Ancient systems screamed warnings no one outside the ship could hear. For the first time, the warship spoke again. This time, the message was translated. Stand back. We are losing margin. The words hit harder than any threat. Losing margin meant there had once been room for error. That room was gone. In human space, fleets launched in silence. No grand speeches. No announcements. Ships emerged from hidden docks, from asteroid fields, from deep storage stations long forgotten by the galaxy. They were not flashy. They were functional, built for endurance, built for war that never ends. A human commander briefed her crew as their ship aligned for transit. This enemy does not negotiate. It does not fear. It does not retreat. If it breaks free, there will be no front lines. No safe worlds. A junior officer asked the question everyone feared. Why didn't you tell us before? The commander's expression hardened. Because the last time the galaxy knew the truth, it panicked and made it worse. Back in forbidden space, the distortion surged again, harder this time. Cracks appeared in the boundary, visible even to untrained eyes. Light bent sharply around them. Stars behind the zone flickered and dimmed. The human warship fired for the first time. There was no beam, no explosion. A pulse rippled outward, warping space like a stone dropped into water. The distortion recoiled, pulling back slightly, as if in pain or anger. The ship held. Barely. Sensors across the galaxy recorded something terrifying. The enemy was learning. It adjusted its pressure, tested different points. It was not mindless. It was patient, and it remembered humanity. Inside the warship, systems failed one by one. Backup layers activated as designed. The ship had been built for this exact moment. But even it had limits. The captain stood on the bridge, eyes fixed forward, hands steady. This was not a surprise. Every human assigned to this duty knew how it would end. What they did not know was whether anyone would arrive in time. The multinational fleet finally withdrew, retreating from the edge in disarray. Pride was gone. Denial shattered. They had seen enough. The assembly issued its first unified statement in centuries. They asked humanity for guidance. Not leadership. Guidance. The response came quickly. A single line. We will hold on as long as we can. Prepare your worlds. As the distortion surged again, stronger than before, the warship's anchors glowed white-hot. Hull fractures spread. Power reserves dipped into emergency levels. For the first time since it appeared, the human warship drifted backward, just a fraction. The forbidden zone pulsed. And something on the other side noticed. The galaxy had always believed that truth was power. That belief died quietly in the hours after the assembly asked humanity for guidance. Because humanity did not respond with demands. It did not send fleets first. It did not threaten. It sent history. Across thousands of worlds, restricted channels unlocked simultaneously. Archives received data packets marked with human encryption older than most interstellar standards. The files were heavy, not just in size, but in meaning. What they contained was not a declaration. It was a confession. The first records showed a younger galaxy. Fewer species. Fewer stars charted. Humans were still learning faster than light travel when the first encounters happened. Not with empires, but with emptiness. Regions where stars should have been were simply gone. Human explorers vanished without wreckage. Colonies lost contact, then ceased to exist in every measurable way. Even my memory failed. Logs rewrote themselves. Coordinates led nowhere. Human scientists noticed patterns others would later miss. This was not destruction. It was removed. Humanity's first wars against the entity were disasters. Fleets were swallowed. Weapons passed through it without effect. Entire task forces vanished mid-sentence. The enemy did not attack. It advanced. It was learned. The records showed humanity making impossible choices. Evacuating worlds they loved. Erasing their own history to prevent panic. Destroying stars to deny the entity energy. Every solution costs lives. Every delay bought time. Eventually, humanity understood the truth no one wanted to accept. The entity could not be killed. It did not exist the way normal things did. So humanity stopped trying to destroy it. They decided to trap it. The Forbidden Zone was not built in one act. It took centuries. A slow tightening of space itself, engineered through methods humanity would later ban even from its own memory. Stars were arranged like weights. Gravity was twisted. Time was stretched and folded. Humanity used itself as bait, luring the entity into a region where it could be isolated. The cost was uncountable. Entire human fleets volunteered for missions that guaranteed erasure. Crews went in knowing they would not be remembered, not even by history. The cage was sealed. Humanity withdrew from the galactic stage, not in defeat, in exhaustion. The final file ended with a single sentence. We stayed silent because silence was safer. The assembly chambers were silent when the transmission ended. No one argued. No one spoke. For the first time, the galaxy understood that its long peace was not earned. It was maintained. While the galaxy processed the truth, the Forbidden Zone continued to strain. The entity pressed harder now, not blindly, but with intent. It had felt the human warship weaken. It understood time. It reminded me of the pain. The warship answered with everything it had left. New systems activated, ones never meant to be seen. Spatial locks tightened. Containment layers collapsed inward, sacrificing stability to preserve integrity. The ship shook. Not violently. Tiredly. On the bridge, the captain felt the tremor through his boots. He did not order repairs. There were none left to make. Instead, he opened a channel. Not to the assembly. To human space. Containment margin is failing faster than projections, he said calmly. If reinforcement does not arrive within 2 cycles, this position will be lost. The response was immediate. Human fleets were already en route. But distance was distance. Time would decide everything. Meanwhile, panic spread across civilian populations. Worlds near the Forbidden Zone began evacuations. Religious leaders declared endings. Markets collapsed. Species that had never known true existential fear felt it for the first time. Some governments made the wrong choice. A coalition of Outer Rim powers decided to strike the entity directly. They believed overwhelming force could succeed where caution failed. They launched a barrage of experimental weapons into the Forbidden Zone. The result was catastrophic. The entity reacted violently for the first time. Containment layers ruptured. Energy backwashed through the zone, tearing apart the attacking fleet before the human warship could intervene. Dozens of ships were erased in seconds. The Forbidden Zone expanded. The warship absorbed the shock, barely. The captain watched his power reserves drop below critical levels. Internal alarms screamed warnings he ignored. He sent one final message to the assembly. Do not attack it. You are making it stronger. This time, they listened. As the zone stabilized temporarily, humanity did something unexpected. They opened their borders. Human diplomats appeared in chambers they had not entered for generations. Their message was not one of command, but of coordination. They did not ask other species to fight like humans. They asked them to support containment, build anchors, stabilize stars, evacuate vulnerable systems, preserve knowledge. Let humanity hold the line. The galaxy agreed, not out of trust, but necessity. Inside the Forbidden Zone, the entity changed tactics. It stopped pushing everywhere. It focused. One point along the boundary began to thin. Space weakened. Reality flickered. The human warship adjusted instantly, shifting position to reinforce the breach. The strain was immense. Hull fractures widened. Systems failed permanently. The ship was burning through components designed to last centuries. The captain knew what this meant. Reinforcements would arrive, but not in time. Humanity had always planned for this outcome. The warship was never meant to survive forever. It was meant to choose where it ended. As the entity pressed harder, the captain issued one final internal order. Prepare final containment protocol. The crew acknowledged without hesitation. They had trained for this. They had lived with this knowledge. Outside the Forbidden Zone, human fleets accelerated, pushing engines beyond safe limits. They were still too far away. Inside the zone, the warship locked itself into position, directly over the weakening point. If the entity wanted freedom, it would have to go through humanity one last time. And the galaxy finally understood something it should have learned long ago. Humans were not brave because they did not fear death. They were brave because they remembered what happened when no one stood in the way. The breach did not explode. It whispered. At first, only the human warship noticed. Its sensors registered a change so small that no foreign system would have flagged it. A subtle shift in pressure. A deviation in spatial tension. Like a hairline crack spreading through glass. The captain felt it through the deck. The ship groaned. Not loudly, not violently, but with the exhausted sound of something that had been holding weight for far too long. Margin is gone. The chief engineer said quietly. We're not losing containment. We've already lost it. We're just deciding how fast. The entity no longer pushed blindly. It probed. Thin filaments of distortion slid along the boundary, searching for weakness. Each contact rewrote local physics. Time stretched. Energy bled away. Space thinned like fabric worn too often. The human ship repositioned again, firing microbursts of containment energy, sealing cracks seconds before they could widen. Each correction cost more power than the last. The ship was bleeding strength. Outside the forbidden zone, the galaxy watched in terror. The human fleets were visible now, dozens of them, emerging from hidden corridors and deep space vectors. Old designs, heavy armor, slow acceleration. Ships built not for speed, but endurance. But they were still too far, and the entity knew it. For the first time since its imprisonment, the enemy acted with intent beyond escape. It attacked the cage itself. Stars near the boundary dimmed unnaturally, their energy drained in smooth, controlled streams. Entire stellar masses lost brightness as if something were drinking from them. Containment anchors failed. One by one, ancient stabilization points collapsed, releasing shockwaves that rippled across the zone. Human calculations adjusted instantly, but there were too many failures, too fast. The warship fired again. This time, the pulse tore chunks out of reality. Space folded inward, crushing part of the breach closed. The entity recoiled, not in pain, but irritation. The effort cost the ship dearly. Decks went dark. Emergency lights flared. Several sections lost gravity entirely. A containment array failed permanently, melting itself into slag. The captain closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had known this was coming. Across the galaxy, the assembly screens filled with chaos. Civilian evacuations accelerated. Entire populations fled worlds near the zone. Trade lanes collapsed. Old alliances shattered under the strain of fear. And still, some leaders hesitated. They asked the question too late. Why don't the humans just destroy it? The answer came from a human scientist standing quietly at the edge of the chamber. Because if we destroy it, we destroy everything around it, including you. Silence followed. Inside the forbidden zone, the entity finally broke through. Not fully. Not yet. A fragment of it slipped past the thinning boundary, a shadow without shape, an absence that devoured meaning. It brushed against the outer layers of containment, testing the galaxy beyond. The effect was immediate. A nearby observation platform lost cohesion. Not torn apart. Not damaged. Forgotten. Every record of it vanished. Sensors showed empty space where it had been. Crew rosters rewrote themselves, removing names that had existed minutes earlier. The galaxy screamed. The human warship surged forward, slamming itself into the breach point, deploying the last of its anchors. Hull plating buckled. Structural integrity alarms wailed. The captain was thrown against the command rail. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead. He stood anyway. Status, he demanded. We can hold this position, the engineer replied, voice shaking. But not indefinitely. How long? A pause. Minutes. Maybe less. The captain nodded once. He opened a channel, not to command, not to the assembly, but to all human ships still racing toward the zone. This is Sentinel-1, he said calmly. Containment failure confirmed. Enemy breach in progress. A younger voice answered, strained with effort. We see it. We're pushing engines past the red line. I know, the captain replied. You won't make it in time. No, the voice insisted. We can. Listen, the captain said, cutting him off gently. You will inherit this fight. That means you must arrive at something still worth defending. He switched channels. This time, the entire galaxy heard him. The entity cannot be allowed into open space, he said. If it does, there will be no front lines, no refuge, no memory of victory or loss. The breach widened. Reality store. The human ship shuddered violently as the entity pushed harder, sensing opportunity. The anchors glowed white-hot, burning away years of reinforced design in seconds. The engineer looked up slowly. We can initiate the final containment protocol. The words hung in the air. Everyone on the bridge knew what they meant. The protocol was not a weapon. It was a decision. Activating it would collapse the remaining containment layers inward, using the warship itself as the final seal. Space would fold. Time would lock. Nothing inside would escape. Nothing inside would survive. The captain looked around the bridge. No one spoke. No one looked away. These were not soldiers sent here by chance. Every crew member had volunteered, knowing the end state of this assignment. Do it, the captain said. The engineer hesitated. Once it starts, there's no abortion. I know. The protocol began. Deep within the ship, ancient systems woke up for the last time. Gravity generators reversed polarity. Dimensional stabilizers overloaded intentionally. The warship's mass increased exponentially as space compressed around it. The entity reacted instantly. It surged with fury for the first time, slamming against the collapsing cage, tearing at the warship with forces that bent causality itself. The ship screamed. Decks tore loose. Bulkheads imploded. Crew were thrown into the void or crushed by shifting gravity. Still, the ship held. Outside the zone, the human fleets finally arrived. They saw the impossible. The forbidden zone collapses inward around a single, burning point of light. The warship, Sentinel-1, break off, a commander shouted. We can take over. The reply came faint, distorted. You already are. The final containment layers snapped into place. Space folded. The breach closed. The entity was forced back, screaming without sound, raging against a prison reforged from sacrifice. The human warship vanished. Not destroyed. Sealed. The forbidden zone stabilized, smaller now, but stronger. Silence returned. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the galaxy realized something else. The warship had not been the last line. It had been the bridge. And humanity had just crossed it. The galaxy did not celebrate. There was no victory cry, no relief parades, no triumphant broadcasts. There was only silence. Where the forbidden zone had once stretched like a wound across the stars, it now sat smaller, denser, sealed so tightly that even light seemed hesitant to pass near it. Sensors confirmed stability. Containment held, but at a cost no measurement could express. The human warship was gone. Its energy signature faded into nothing, folded into the prison it had reforged. No debris, no wreckage, no trace of the crew who had stood their ground until the end. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy survived a catastrophe it fully understood. And that understanding hurts. Human fleets established a perimeter without ceremony. They did not posture. They did not declare dominance. They simply worked, deploying new anchors, stabilizing weakened stars, reinforcing the prison with technologies no one else recognized. Other species joined in quietly. No one needed orders anymore. In assembly space, leaders sat in stunned silence as casualty projections finalized. Entire observation platforms erased. Fleets lost without wreckage. Civilian populations displaced by the millions. And one human ship, one crew, gone forever. A younger delegate finally spoke. They saved us, she said softly. No one argued. The truth settled heavily across the chamber. For generations, the galaxy had believed humans were irrelevant, background noise in a universe of ancient powers. But relevance had never been humanity's goal. Responsibility had been. In human space, mourning was private. There were no public monuments. No speeches broadcast across stars. Families received simple notifications, carefully worded, stripped of unnecessary detail. Assignment completed. Crew honored. That was all. Human commanders met in quiet rooms, reviewing data feeds from the sealed zone. The entity was contained, but not destroyed. Never destroyed. Humanity had always known this phase would come. The war had entered its final shape. A human admiral addressed a joint task force composed of dozens of species. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of exhaustion. Containment will hold, he said, but only if it is maintained. This prison is not self-sustaining. A foreign commander asked the question none of them wanted to hear. How long? The admiral did not answer immediately. Forever, he said finally, or until someone stops doing the work. The room absorbed that. Forever meant no ending, no final battle, no moment where the galaxy could relax and forget again. Forever meant duty without glory. Some species hesitated. Their cultures had never planned for eternal vigilance. Wars ended. Enemies fell. History moved on. Humanity had already learned that lesson the hard way. We will rotate crews, the admiral continued. We will share the burden. No one species holds this line alone again. That was new. For the first time in its long, quiet war, humanity asked for help. And the galaxy agreed. Construction began almost immediately. Joint stations formed around the Forbidden Zone. New doctrines emerged. Shared command structures replaced old rivalries. Species that had once distrusted one another now worked side by side, bound by a single truth. If the prison failed again, no one would escape what followed. Weeks passed, then months. The galaxy stabilized into a fragile new normal. Trade resumed cautiously. Evacuated worlds were resettled. But something fundamental had changed. Fear no longer lived only in legends. It lived in memory. At a newly built observation platform near the Forbidden Zone, a non-human engineer studied containment data beside a human counterpart. "I don't understand," the engineer admitted. "Your people could have ruled us long ago. Why didn't you?" The human did not look up from his console. "Because ruling means being responsible for everything that goes wrong," he said. "We already were." The engineer fell silent. In assembly space, a proposal emerged. Rename the Forbidden Zone. Not as a threat, not as a warning, as a memorial. The motion passed unanimously. The new designation spread across star maps, translated into thousands of languages. Sentinel Reach. Humanity did not comment. They were busy preparing for the next phase. Deep within the sealed region, sensors detected movement again. Not a breach, not an attack, a response. The entity was aware of the change. It tested the prison carefully now, probing its edges like a predator that had learned patience. It remembered the ship that had sealed it in. It remembered humanity. Human analysts studied the data with grim focus. "The entity adapts," one scientist said. "Not quickly, but inevitably." "So do we," another replied. Humanity began constructing something new. Not a warship, not a weapon, a network. Distributed, redundant, shared. No single point of failure. No lone sentinel. The age of solitary sacrifice was ending. But the danger was not. At the edge of Sentinel Reach, a young officer stood watching the darkened stars. She had never seen the warship that vanished. Only records. Only echoes. "Do you think they knew?" she asked quietly. Her commander nodded. "They always know." Did it scare them? The commander considered the question. "Yes," he said. But fear wasn't the reason they stayed. The officer looked back toward the sealed darkness. Then what was? The commander's voice softened. Because someone had to be the last thing between the galaxy and forgetting itself. Far inside Sentinel Reach, the entity pressed once more against the walls of its prison. They did not move. They held, but not effortlessly. The war was not over. It had simply become what it had always been meant to be. A watch, a burden, shared at last. And across the galaxy, a new understanding took root. Humanity was not terrifying because of its weapons. Not because of its ships, not because of its intelligence. Humanity was terrifying because it would stand guard forever and never ask for praise. The first warning did not come from human sensors. It came from an allied station crewed by 3 species that had never fought together before Sentinel Reach existed. Their instruments showed something impossible. Containment was stable. Energy flow was normal. No pressure spikes. No spatial distortion. And yet, something was wrong. A junior technician noticed it first. A minor discrepancy in background readings. Too smooth, too perfect. Like silence after a scream. She flagged it. The system did not respond. Not with an error. Not with a failure. It accepted the data. That was the problem. The entity had learned not to push. It had learned to pretend. Human analysts realized the truth seconds later, when their deeper systems flagged a pattern no automated network could see. The enemy was no longer testing the walls. It was rewriting how the walls were perceived. Inside Sentinel Reach, containment anchors began reporting identical readings across multiple locations, an impossibility. Reality was not that neat. The entity was masking itself, not breaking free, preparing. Emergency commands rippled across the joint network. Human ships altered formation. Non-human vessels followed without hesitation this time. Trust had been earned in blood. Switch to analog verification, a human commander ordered. Hardline sensors only. No predictive smoothing. The data came back ugly. The prison was hollowing. Not outward. Inward. The entity was compressing itself, folding layers of its existence tighter and tighter, concentrating pressure like a star on the edge of collapse. It was not trying to escape everywhere. It was choosing one point. A point dangerously close to populated space. If it breached there, the damage would be immediate. Not a slow erasure. A cascading failure across dozens of systems. For the first time since the war began, the galaxy was not reacting to humanity. It was reacting with them. Joint fleets moved into position. Stabilizers powered up. Species that once refused to share technology now linked systems without debate. But something was missing. Human projections showed the same conclusion across every model. Containment would fail at the chosen point. Not because of weakness, because the entity had evolved past brute force. It was becoming selective. The human admiral overseeing Sentinel Reach closed his eyes briefly as the realization settled. "It's baiting us," he said. "How?" a foreign commander asked. "It wants us to reinforce one area," the admiral replied, "so it can break another while we're blind." "But we're watching everything," the commander protested. The admiral shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "We're watching what it allows us to see." Deep inside Sentinel Reach, something changed. The entity stopped hiding. It pushed hard at the predicted breach point. Containment screamed. Anchors strained. Reality buckled. Exactly as expected. Fleets surged to reinforce it. Exactly as planned. Then, elsewhere, space collapsed. Not outward. Downward. A pocket of compressed nothingness formed behind the containment network, bypassing anchors entirely. It was not a hole. It was a fold. The entity had learned to move through dimensions the galaxy barely understood. Alarms detonated across command centers. Containment failure imminent. Human command did not hesitate. They triggered phase black. No one else knew what that meant until human ships began detaching from the perimeter, moving inward toward the prison itself. A foreign commander stared in disbelief. "You're going inside?" she demanded. "Yes," the human replied calmly. "That's suicide." The human looked at her. So I was standing alone for the first time. Inside Sentinel Reach, human vessels crossed thresholds no other species dared approach. Their hulls burned. Systems degraded. Crews endured distortions that twisted perception and time. They did not flinch. They had trained for this. The entity reacted instantly, sensing intrusion. It lashed out, not blindly, but precisely, targeting human ships with focused annihilation. Several vanished. No explosions. Just absence. Still, more advanced. They were not attacking. They were reshaping the prison from within. Human ships deployed devices never shared before, dimensional stakes, gravitational locks, temporal disruptors. Each one anchored a piece of reality in place, limiting how the entity could move. The cost was horrific. Crews aged in seconds. Others experienced loops of memory. Some never reported anything at all. Humanity paid anyway. Outside Sentinel Reach, Allied fleets did something unprecedented. They followed. Species that had once sworn never to enter forbidden space crossed the line voluntarily. Their ships strained. Their crews panicked. Human vessels guided them through safe corridors, absorbing the worst distortions. No one was left behind. The galaxy fought as one for the first time in its history. At the heart of the prison, the entity encountered something new. Resistance that adapted as fast as it did. It recoiled, not in fear, but confusion. This was not the pattern it remembered. Human analysts saw the shift immediately. "It's never faced cooperation like this," one said. "That's because last time," another replied, "we didn't trust anyone enough to try." The entity pushed harder. The prison shook. Stars near Sentinel Reach dimmed again. Energy drained at catastrophic rates. Human command made the call none of them wanted. "Prepare Echo's sacrifice." Silence fell across the channel. Echo's sacrifice meant repeating what Sentinel-1 had done, but on a larger scale. Multiple ships. Multiple crews. The galaxy heard the order. This time, humanity did not give it alone. A non-human commander spoke up. "We will contribute," she said firmly. "You don't understand," a human officer began. "We understand enough," she interrupted. "You stood alone, so we didn't have to learn this the hard way. That debt is not yours anymore." One by one, Allied ships volunteered. Not because they were ordered, because they chose to. Human command hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then they accepted. The sacrifice sequence began. Ships moved into final positions, forming a living lattice around the collapsing fold. Reality bent. Space screamed. Time fractured. The entity fought back with everything it had left. But it was too late. The lattice closed. The fold collapsed inward, sealing permanently. The entity was forced back into a tighter prison than ever before. Echo's sacrifice ended. Ships vanished. Crews were lost. The containment held. This time, humanity was not alone at the end. Silence returned once more. But it was different now. It was shared. And across the galaxy, a truth finally settled into collective memory. The enemy was real. The war was eternal. And survival was no longer humanity's burden alone. Inside Sentinel Reach, the prison stabilized at a level unseen since its creation. The entity remained trapped, wounded, angry, aware. Humanity studied the aftermath with grim clarity. This is not the end, a scientist said quietly. No, the Admiral agreed. But it's the first time the galaxy survived because it stood together. Beyond Sentinel Reach, worlds mourned the lost. Names were recorded. Histories preserved. No one would be erased again. And for the first time since the war began centuries ago, humanity allowed itself a single, fragile thought. Maybe the final sacrifice would not belong to them alone. The galaxy did not rush back to normal. It couldn't. Too much had been learned. Sentinel Reach remained sealed, darker and denser than ever before. Sensors confirmed stability beyond any previous threshold. The prison was no longer a single structure or a single sacrifice. It was a system, shared, layered, watched. The entity was still there. It always would be. But it was no longer alone with humanity. Across the stars, mourning took many forms. Some species built monuments. Others recorded names into memory crystals designed to outlast suns. A few cultures, and used to loss on this scale, struggled to find words at all. Humanity did not build statues. They updated records. Every lost ship, every crew, every allied vessel that vanished during Echo's sacrifice was logged into a new archive. One mirrored across dozens of species, stored redundantly, protected fiercely. No one would be erased again. In assembly space, the chambers were quieter than they had ever been. Debate had been replaced by reflection. The old hierarchies, ancient powers, younger nations, tolerated species, felt fragile now. A non-human delegate finally addressed the assembly. We believed strength was measured by how loudly a species could dominate history, she said. We were wrong. She turned toward the human representatives. You disappeared from our affairs, and we assumed weakness. We never considered fatigue. Humanity did not deny it. A human envoy stood, posture relaxed but eyes tired. We didn't leave because we wanted peace, he said. We left because we were running out of people willing to die quietly while everyone else slept. The words carried no accusation, just the truth. A proposal was introduced that same session. Not a treaty, a responsibility. Sentinel Reach would no longer be guarded by humans alone. Rotational watch would be mandatory for all major powers. No species could claim ignorance. No government could pretend the threat was someone else's problem. The vote passed without dissent. History marked it as the first unanimous decision made without fear of war. In human space, life continued. Shipyards repaired damage. Training academies adjusted curricula. Children still learn mathematics, art, and history. But now, history included names once hidden. Not to glorify sacrifice, to explain it. A human instructor stood before a class of young cadets, displaying a star map centered on Sentinel Reach. This, she said, is why our borders are quiet. A student raised a hand. Why didn't we just tell everyone before? He asked. The instructor paused. Because knowing the truth too early would have destroyed unity, she replied. Knowing it too late almost destroyed everything. The class absorbed that. Far from classrooms and councils, deep inside Sentinel Reach, the entity remained aware. It no longer tested the walls recklessly. I watched. It was learned. But for the first time since its discovery, it encountered resistance that did not fracture under pressure. The prison adjusted dynamically now. Every probe it made was met with correction. It was trapped not by walls, but by cooperation. Human scientists monitored its behavior carefully. There were no celebrations. No declarations of final victory. Only vigilance. This is as close to forever as physics allows, one researcher said quietly. But forever still needs maintenance. Humanity understood that better than anyone. Years passed. The galaxy changed. Species once obsessed with expansion slowed. Borders mattered less than stability. Military doctrines shifted from conquest to preservation. Humanity's reputation changed too, but not into something heroic or mythical. Something heavier. When humans spoke in council, They were listened to, not because they demanded it, but because they carried memories others wished they had. Sentinel Reach became a point of reference in every major culture, not as a warning of doom, as a reminder of cost. At the edge of the sealed region, a joint watch station orbited a dim star. Crewed by 6 species, it rotated personnel regularly. On one quiet cycle, a non-human officer asked her human counterpart a question she had held for years. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Standing alone for so long?" Humans considered the stars beyond the viewport. "No," he said finally. "I regret that we thought we had to." The officer nodded slowly. Beyond the station, the prison held firm. No tremors. No distortions. The enemy waited, as it always would. But waiting was no longer enough. It had lost something it never expected to lose. An advantage. Inside the prison, the entity sensed the difference. Before, humanity had been the only constant, predictable in its sacrifice, reliable in its endurance. Now, the galaxy itself has become unpredictable. Shared resolve did what weapons never could. It is a limited possibility. Human analysts noticed a subtle shift over time. The entity's activity slowed, not because it weakened, but because it could no longer find leverage. The final report on Sentinel Reach ended with a single assessment. Containment is sustainable. Risk minimized. Erasure probability approaching 0. For the first time in recorded history, that word mattered. 0. In the assembly, a final session was held to formally close the crisis phase. Representatives stood together, not divided by species or power. A senior figure spoke one last time. "The galaxy trembled when a human warship appeared in forbidden space," he said. "We believe the fear came from what humanity might do to us." He paused. "We were wrong. The fear came from realizing what they had already done for us." The chamber remained silent, not out of obligation, out of respect. As the session ended, star maps updated across the galaxy. Sentinel Reach remained marked, not as forbidden, not as dangerous, as watched, as remembered. And far away, in quiet human space, an old transmission played in a memorial archive. The voice was calm, steady. "We will hold on as long as we can. Prepare your worlds." Humanity has done more than hold. It had taught the galaxy how. The war did not end with victory. It ended with understanding. And that was enough to ensure it would never have to be fought alone again.